Let's talk about how to debate without fear. Alright, you're going to need three things: a rabbit's foot, the skull of your enemy, and a wee little animal called a stoat. I'll tell you where you put that later. Hi folks, and welcome to Breaking Woke, how to identify, debunk and dismantle dangerous ideas. Ordinarily on this channel, we talk about the ideas themselves, and we go looking for the flaws, the fallacies, and the underpinning errors in thinking. Today, let's do something a little different. We're going to talk about the debate and the fear that that causes. I've been a professional speaker for some 20 years, and I'm very familiar with the pre-speech jitters and nerves and so forth, and in many ways, debates are just that much worse, because it pits you against an ideological opponent. There's a joke that does the rounds in the world of public speaking where they send out surveys and they ask people, what is your number one fear? And typically the response to that is death coming second. Death is people's second worst fear, and public speaking tops the list. And what that teaches us is that at your average funeral, most people would rather be the guy in the box than the one delivering the eulogy. Now add judges and an opponent who is hell-bent on taking apart your position. How do you deal with that fear? Well, for starters, relax, it is just a debate. It is not the defining moment of your life. The rules of Oxford Union do not permit for the loser to be sacrificed to Baal, unless that has changed recently. So, at the end of this, here's what is going to happen. You'll have either a half hour, perhaps an hour of debate with an opponent, and at the end of that, two groups of people will leave that hall, and one group will think that their person has won, and the other group will think that you have won, and they will discuss the things that happened and the things that were said, and life will go on. I think a healthy way to look at a debate is this. Don't think of it as the big defining battle of your life. Better to think of it as a learning opportunity so that you do better in the next one. I find from professional speaking that if I have, say, a month without a presentation, that one big presentation becomes something huge in my mind, something terrifying. However, if I have 3 within a week, it becomes ordinary. It becomes the thing that you do. Ben Shapiro talks about that as being walking toward the fire. He says his mentor taught him, walk toward the fire. And the more regularly you do it, the more you become comfortable with it. And it becomes less of a defining moment in your life and more of just another event, that thing that you do and that you get better at because you do it often. Now, that said, let's look at a few things that you can do in order to make this a little easier for you. First, very logically, very simple, straightforward idea, ask for, find out the structure, the rules, and the timing. You don't want to arrive on the day and wonder what it is that you have to do. And when you find out the structure, the rules, and the timing, it diminishes the entire thing in your mind. You will be told, for example, you'll have an opening 5-minute statement, and then you will respond to your opponent's opening 5-minute statement. And then there'll be maybe a 10-minute period in which the two of you go back and forth. And when you look at that structure, you go, oh, that's not so bad. I have control over my opening statement. I can anticipate the sorts of things that my opponent is likely to say, and it diminishes the entire, the grandeur of the entire thing within your mind. So that's the first one. Second one, and I found this advice extremely useful. I read it on social media somewhere from a person who spends a lot of time debating, and they pointed out you shouldn't go there trying to outwit your opponent. Instead, simply go there to say the thing that you intend to say. That takes a great deal of pressure off you. Instead of thinking of it as something akin to a boxing match where you're there to trade blows and it's all about outwitting your opponent, take that pressure off yourself. Instead, think of it this way. I have a position, I have a thing I want to say. I'm going to prepare it and I'm going to go there and say it well. If I'm able to interact with my opponent in such a way that I can say something witty, something profound, something that takes apart and dismantles their argument, well, wonderful. If not, that's okay. You're going there to state your position and to state it well. Keep that in mind and use that as your orientation. It makes the world of difference. Next, don't go there and reinvent the wheel. Every debate that you could possibly face, every topic, every theme, has been debated somewhere before. YouTube is your friend. Go and type that topic into a YouTube search and watch what has been done before. You will, for example, learn from that what points you can make that are strong. You will learn from that which points are easily taken apart by an opponent. You will learn what your opponent is likely to say, and you might then be able to discern ways of responding to that. Or at the very least, it will bring you up to speed in terms of how other people have responded to that. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you are debating knowledge, that knowledge is pre-existing. Go and find out what the battlefront looks like and how far that knowledge has been taken. You can do the same thing with your opponent. If you know who your opponent is within the debate, go and have a look at their social media. Go and have a look at their articles, their videos, and so forth, and you will get a feel for their thinking, the types of things that they propose, and how they propose them. You will get a sense of where they are coming from, what they believe, and the structure of their thinking. That is immensely useful, and it is in fact, in a sense, bizarre not to do that. Why would you not want to know what the other person thinks when you are there to debate their thinking? Go and find out. Now, another thing that you can do is beware of responding to every small point as though you were obliged to do so. Often there are underlying principles or a sense of where your opponent is coming from, and it is much more useful to flip the power dynamic and look at that instead. And I'll give you two examples of that one. I'll give you a simple one and I'll give you a fairly complex one. Let's start with a simple one. Say, for example, that you're someone like myself who believes in free market capitalism and free business and free trade, and you are debating a socialist. This is one of the world's great debates at this point in time, which is actually quite a surprising thing in this century. Now, you don't have to defend against every strange and specific attack that they might conjure up. There is, in fact, a man by the name of Saul Alinsky, and Alinsky wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. And Rules for Radicals is essentially, it's a communist guide to attacking the old order. One of the things that Saul Alinsky proposes is that you find strange, bizarre, unanswerable challenges. And in doing so, you keep your opponent on the back foot and defensive. Now, that is a powerful leftist tactic that works if you allow it to. Instead, what you should do is you should flip the power dynamic and respond by making them defend where they are coming from. So, for example, your interlocutor gives you an idea that is something you have never heard of because they've gone shopping for a strange frailty in the free market system. And your response to that could be something down these lines. No human system is perfect, but this is the best system that we have. You, however, are coming from the place of defending the worst system that we have. You are proposing and defending an ideology that is responsible for the death by government genocide or starvation of over 120 million people. And in defense of that system, you found an obscure part of my imperfect but superior system at which you can nitpick. Then you've flipped the dynamic and you go on the offensive. That's a fairly simple example of that technique. Here's a more complex one. Say, for example, that you are debating with a materialist atheist. Maybe you're debating something as great as, is there a God, or do we come from meaninglessness, or whatever the case might be. You need to understand some of the governing principles by which their worldview exists. Which is, for example, there is no such thing as ought. There is only is. Let me explain what I mean by that one. If you are a materialist atheist, then the only meaningful conception of truth is that which is. You may not speak meaningfully on that which ought to be. And this is quite a powerful technique when you understand it. Your aggressive Marxist communist professor will tell you how humanity ought to be ordered. And you can say, excuse me, stop right there. Didn't you tell us last week that there's no such thing as God? All is simply molecules. In that case, the only meaningful, truthful thing you can say is, this is what is, but you cannot speak on what ought. When you get into those realms, that is your biased, subjective, human emotion. You can say things like, we ought to have an egalitarian society, but that's not truth, that's just your emotions. And I can point out that your egalitarian society is responsible for the death by government genocide or starvation of over 120 million people. So, When you debate someone who comes from what they perceive as a secular, scientific, or atheist worldview, watch out for anything that they say that is an ought, a prescriptive, what we should. There is no meaningful ought derived from all is simply molecules. They are stepping out of what they themselves describe as the truth of science and into what is called scientism, which is kind of a faux philosophy based on science, but is not true by its own terms. So that's a bit of a complex way of looking at it, but these are the ways in which you can maneuver your opponent into an inability to speak by their own terms. Understand where they're coming from and hold them to those standards. If there is no such thing as meaningfulness derived from the molecules of the universe, then they can't have it. There you go, that's a useful little gift to you. So, a couple of other things that you can do, as Ben Shapiro often points out, walk toward the fire. Feel the fear and do it anyway. If you are nervous, if you are fearful before a debate, that's because you're human. A debate is like public speaking, only one step worse. Everyone is judging you. So don't worry about whether or not it is pass or fail. You will not be executed at the end of this. You're there to make the strongest possible statement for what you believe, and then it ends. And every time you do this, you become better at it. 3 things. On this channel, I show you how to debate bad ideology. That is my point and purpose in life. I show you where the flaws, fallacies, and underlying errors are in the reasoning so that you can get to them, you can unravel them, and you can get better at it. Please subscribe to this channel, and if you know someone who is facing a debate and needs that kind of information, please get them to subscribe as well. Please share the videos. Secondly, my entire global new book, Political Correctness Does More Harm Than Good, is one gigantic guide to how to do that. It takes the history of terrible politically correct ideas right up to today's identity politics, and it unravels them one by one, both through looking at the flawed history and through looking at the flawed reasoning, and giving you responses in every case. Please do get hold of the book. You can get it via Amazon.com, and the audiobook will be available soon from Audible as well. Third, if you have any more tips for someone facing a debate, whether it is formal or whether it's perhaps informal in the world of academia where we argue with Marxist professors, won't you please share it in the comments? A principle for how to handle your fear, how to approach these debates, and how you can learn from them and become more effective in future. I'm Douglas Kruger. This is Breaking Woke.